Welcome, this is Rafael Alejandro with my review of The Legend of Spyro, A New Beginning by Sierra Entertainment. The Legend of Spyro series is a reboot of the classic Spyro the Dragon series, which started off on the Sony PlayStation. What that means is that the Spyro series up to this point is now over, and this aptly titled game begins a new series from the beginning. The very easygoing story of the classic series is gone, and what we get instead is a story that, while still somewhat lighthearted, tries to be more serious and seems to present itself as if it could be a feature-length film. I'll be talking about the PlayStation 2 version, although it should be almost the same as the Xbox and GameCube versions. The game begins just as you would expect any grand movie on the big screen to begin, complete with credits depicting the names of the main actors, in this case Elijah Wood, David Spade, and Gary Oldman.
Eventually, the egg came to rest in a distant swamp.
Before that though, we get a brief introduction where we see a large red dragon run off with a purple dragon egg, presumably containing an unborn Spyro. This dragon proceeds to place that egg in a river, and as he watches it sail off, utters what seems to constitute a prayer in this mythos.
May the ancestors look after you. May they look after us all.
This of course bears no resemblance to a character from the Book of Exodus who was also placed in a river. So Spyro is found and raised by dragonflies and thus grows up thinking he's one of them because he doesn't know where he really came from. Again, totally unlike a popular biblical character. In the next scene we see that baby Spyro has grown up with his brother Sparx. The game as a whole is very heavy on the tutorials. In fact, the very first thing you do is learn how to control the camera. You can't even move Spyro for the first few seconds of actual gameplay. After a minute or so, you've been shown the basic controls and proceed to follow Sparx, who is apparently the only other character to transfer over from the previous continuity. It seems that in this story, Sparx is now the comic relief.
Spyro, can you hear me? Are you okay, buddy? Hey, listen, forget about those cracks I made about your fatness and your being purple and stupid and fat.
His gameplay role has also changed greatly in this game. In the classic series, Sparx was essentially the health meter, with his color signifying how many hits Spyro could take. Now, Spyro has a more traditional health meter, thus freeing Sparx of that role, and allowing the story to even include parts where Sparx isn't necessarily hovering immediately around Spyro's head. While he still does that, Sparx will also often fly ahead and point out where to go next.
Wonder where we should start.
Well, I'm no hero like you, but maybe we should take that clearly marked path that leads to the interior.
Overall, the classic games felt a lot more like traditional platformers, while this game seems to have become more of an action RPG like The Legend of Zelda. Except you're a dragon. After he fights off a few easy monsters with only his basic attack, Spyro frees Sparx from them by inexplicably breathing fire. Apparently, nobody knew he could do that. This is followed by Spyro's father delivering the cliché,
"Your mother and I knew this day would come, the day when we would have to tell you the truth."
Needless to say, Spyro decides to leave and now fights his way out of the home of the dragonflies until he just happens to run into the same large red dragon that left him in the river as an egg. Naturally, the first thing Spyro does when he finally sees another dragon is ask a bunch of questions.
Too late for what? Who are you? Do you know me? Where do I come from? What are you? What are we? What am I?
This is followed by said dragon explaining their history in a lengthy cutscene where we first find out about Cinder, the evil female dragon. Because as we all know, women are naturally more evil than men. This dragon, Ignitus, seems to be the Obi-Wan Kenobi to Spyro's Luke Skywalker. At first, he seems hopeless about the situation, but Spyro says,
I've come way too far to give up now.
Way too far? He's been traveling for like 5 minutes. You learn the other basic gameplay elements as Spyro fights his way into the Dragon Temple. The gems are no longer just an abstract treasure for you to collect. I really like that they serve an actual purpose in this game other than 100% completion. The red gems restore your life gauge, the green ones your magic gauge, the purple ones your fury gauge, and the blue ones your experience pool. You no longer have unlimited fire breath, and instead rely on your magic gauge for being able to use your breath attacks. Of course, now you also have other elemental breath attacks. As a variation on the traditional Earth, Fire, Wind, Water elemental scheme, you gain Fire, Electric, Ice, and Earth-powered elemental breath attacks over the course of the game. Now, however, you can actually upgrade all of these attacks, which is where your experience pool comes into play. From the pause menu, you can choose one of your current attacks and pour into it from your experience pool until it levels up into the next attacks. In another attempt to appear more like a movie, there's also a feature that causes everything to go into slow motion when you perform your aerial combo. In the pause menu, you can adjust how often this happens depending on how big a fan you are of dramatic effects or by how much you want Spyro to look like an action star. As expected, Ignitus trains Spyro, which means another tutorial. Ignitus pits you against different sorts of dummies because apparently large red dragons can make dummy versions of the same enemies you fight outside spawn out of the floor. This is where you finally learn Spyro's different melee combos and uses of his fire breath. These include his basic headbutt, standing combo, knocking opponents into the air, chaining this into your aerial combo, knocking your opponents into each other, your standard breath attack, and your secondary long-range breath attack. At the end of the tutorial, you learn that Spyro also has limit breaks. Okay, limit breaks, overdrives, hyper combos, whatever you want to call them. In this game, they're called Fury attacks, and that's where your Fury gauge and the purple gems come into play. When you've collected enough purple gems to completely fill Spyro's Fury gauge, you can press R2 and perform a Fury attack based on whatever elemental breath Spyro is currently using. At long last, after you're about an hour or so into the game, you know how to use all of Spyro's physical and fire-based attacks. Of course, you could have figured it all out in about a minute from reading pages 3 and 4 in the instruction manual. But as we all know, nobody reads the instructions. Ever! So now, Spyro is off on his quest to save all of Dragonkind from his nemesis, Cinder the Dark Dragon. Spyro is not Moses. The game is actually pretty short and easy. I was able to beat it my first time around in about 7 hours without really hurrying. Whenever you're fighting near the edge of a platform, you can shove your enemies off with your electricity. So between your physical combos and uses of your magic, there does seem to be some legitimate strategy to this game. I found that a lot of times it works to constantly switch between physical and magical attacks against normal enemies, since it allows you to attack more continuously rather than pausing at the end of your combo or after your magic fizzles. Since your breaths each have 2 attacks, you have a total of 8 spells to level up. When you completely level up both spells of a particular element, your corresponding Fury also levels up. For this reason, it makes sense to level up your Fire Breath all the way as soon as possible so as to have a more powerful Fury attack. There will still, however, be parts where your other breaths come in handy. Reboots, remakes, or any game in a series after a point where things drastically change often suffer from fans of the originals crying out about how the series has been ruined. This syndrome is also known as, "they changed it, now it sucks." Now, I'm a big fan of the original Spyro the Dragon series, and as my friends will tell you, dragons in general. I still recommend this game to any Spyro fan, even if you don't think you'll enjoy it as much as the classic series, because it really is a good game in its own right. If you've never been into Spyro, but you're looking for a short, easy story game to play through, this game makes an excellent rental, since as I said, it's short enough that you can play through it in a couple sittings, but long enough to be worth the rental cost. With 2 sequels, this is also a great place to get into Spyro for the first time. If you're a parent looking for something for your 10-year-old, this is an enjoyable, brightly colored, and kid-friendly game. I like to believe that children can enjoy age-appropriate games like Spyro instead of begging to play Grand Theft Auto. Anyways, at 22, I thoroughly enjoyed this game, even if it wasn't quite as groundbreaking as the original Spyro the Dragon. It was fun, and it did lead into the next game in the series, The Legend of Spyro Eternal Night, which is the next game I plan on taking a look at. Thank you for listening, and happy gaming.